Hey everyone, welcome to the first, maybe second episode of Can't Cooks. I guess the first one where I actually talk. So for those wondering why I was recording myself cleaning a stove, I started cooking. I realized how dirty it was when I actually saw the playback and decided to clean it. I forgot I was filming and also how fire works with metal apparently. So the first step, we're just toasting and then grinding up some cumin, coriander, and then what I think is black peppercorn. I did this a while ago, so sorry, I seem to have forgotten. But I don't really do measurements with this recipe. I don't really do measurements in a lot of recipes, so just go along with it. We're adding in way too much salt, fresh ground pepper, rosemary, garlic, and onion powder, and then that's followed by sweet paprika, and then just way too much smoked paprika. Honestly, just go with what you think you'll like. Mixes like this are super forgiving. A lot of the flavor tends to come from the salt and then gets added in with the other flavors around it. And we've added in this much smoked paprika just to offset the fact that, we're not using a barbecue or a smoker for this. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to get our hands dirty. We're going to remove the membrane from the back of the bones. And the best way to do this is just to nip underneath it from the corner with a sharp knife and then use a paper towel. Honestly, I'm struggling here way more than I should be. It is a lot harder than it looks just because I'm using what they call back ribs for beef ribs as opposed to what you want to get, which are kind of like plate short ribs. Those are the ones that they slice really thin for things like, galbi and Korean barbecue or even in South American asado style ribs. So after stripping off as much of the membrane as possible, we now come to my second up after burning my hand. I'm using canola oil here to coat the ribs to help the ribs stick. This was a bad decision, don't do it. We'll talk about it later in the video. What you want to use is a smooth yellow mustard. Mustard not only works much better as a binding agent, honestly it's the binding agent in barbecue, it also tenderizes the meat and gives it a really nice crust. The quality of the mustard here isn't too much of an issue because its flavors mellow out after a long cook time. You'll probably see this for my next video where I make a prime rib that's just entirely way too large. It's 7 pounds, and for people who use sensible measuring systems, that's over 3 kgs. Once you've thoroughly coated the ribs, you can optionally line a baking tray with foil before non-optionally putting the now encased ribs onto a rack and leaving it in the fridge to rest. You want to do this for a minimum of about an hour up to overnight. I took mine out after a couple of hours because I was a dumbass and did this video on a whim and ended up putting them into the oven at about 6:30 or 7 p.m. Speaking of, wrap the ribs in foil as tightly as possible and then put them into a 275 to 325 Fahrenheit oven for a minimum of 3 hours. You can go as long as you want on this. The longer you go, the more fat is going to render out and the more tender the ribs are going to be. Once the ribs are your definition of done, we're going to take them out and remove the foil to uncover your masterpiece. Honestly, this thing smelled amazing. Not having had dinner by like 10:30 probably didn't help, but I'm sure you'll at the very least enjoy the smell that now, emanates through your kitchen. We're now going to build what Brad Leone of Bon Appetit calls a shellac. Basically, it's a couple of layers of caramelized barbecue sauce on the ribs. We're going to do this by coating the ribs with barbecue sauce and putting them under a broiler, or as us Commonwealth folk tend to call it, a grill. Now, here's where up number 2 shows up. You'll notice it more on the underside of the ribs thanks to the bones. The canola oil doesn't do a great job of holding the rub in place after cooking. Again, just use mustard. You can do this 2 to 4 times on each side, but I really wouldn't suggest going much further than that unless you're working with like a low sugar barbecue sauce. The sugar in barbecue sauce means it burns quicker and you definitely don't want to be burning the outside of the ribs that you just spent 3+ hours cooking. That said, doing this definitely adds a entirely new dimension of flavor. Speaking of flavor dimensions, next what we're going to do is we're going to make a really simple coleslaw. To be fair, I'm not even sure it can be called a coleslaw. I'm basically dicing up some red onion and textured water, otherwise known as iceberg lettuce, and mixing it with some mayo, vinegar, and salt and fresh ground pepper. Now, this is adding just a little bit of brightness, a little bit of tang to what's otherwise going to be quite a rich dish. You know, you've got a lot of fat in the ribs, you've got a really strong beefy flavor, and then you also have butter on the buns, which is going to come up very shortly. Now, the version of this that I'm doing is very straightforward, very simple, but this is where you can start getting creative, right? You can go down the line of the special sauce that they often have, mustard, ketchup, mayo, paprika, garlic powder, onion powder, that kind of thing, even a little bit of relish in there, or you can just leave it as is. Either way, this is going to be a amazing slider. Now we're getting into carving the ribs, finally. Now, I didn't wait too long, as long as I should have. You generally want to let these rest for, I would say, anywhere from half an hour to even up to an hour, depending on how thick or how meaty your ribs are. But if you're like me and you just want to dig straight into it, yeah, feel free. It's just not advisable. Not just for your fingers, but it is better for the meat as well. But as you can tell here, it's still extremely juicy. And if I had cooked these for longer, you'd probably see less fat in there. More of it would have dripped down into a pan. Pro tip, use that to make sauces or gravy. Trust me, it'll be amazing. So once you've gotten all of the meat off the bones, next what you want to do is you want to shred them. We're just going to make these into slightly smaller pieces. There's nothing wrong with putting these bigger pieces on them. I just found that, by breaking them down, you get a much better distribution of crust to meat. It's just better. Now, what do you do with burger buns? This is something that if you've watched any YouTube or even celebrity chef make burgers, this is one of the things that they will tell you, particularly for homemade burgers. Always toast your buns, preferably in butter. If I'm using the barbecue or, just because if I can't be bothered, I'll sometimes use canola oil, but butter really is the way to go. What this does is it gives the burger just that little bit of a crust, which adds not only a little bit of texture, but it'll also stop the burger from getting too soggy. Pretty standard burger formation here. Bun, leafy greens. Always put leafy greens under the warmer ingredients to avoid wilting. Short rib, and then the top bun. I'm not using any sauce here as the coleslaw and ribs aren't really dry at all. Present them nicely for your Instagram photo, scoff them down, and then go back and eat one more because you ate dinner at like 11 p.m. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed, and should have a Prime Room episode soon, hopefully. Peace.